This is Bloomberg Business of Sports.
The cold, hard truth about the Olympic journey is not really been financially incentivized in the same way that many other professional sports are.
The business of basketball involves CBA, Global, our licensing arm, Think 450. All of those things will make up what that looks like.
Money in sports. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy being on Monday Night Countdown and talk about some of the more interesting aspects of business of sports.
When you're talking sports, discipline is the bridge from being good to ultimately being great at whatever it is that you're trying to be or accomplish at your profession.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, and we have a special guest host coming from the vaults of the Business of Sports fantasy shows. Damian Sassower joins us. Welcome to the show, my man.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Barr.
Oh, man, we're going to have some fun later on when the football season comes up. Coming up today, we will talk with the former chairman of the board and CEO of TD Ameritrade, Joe Moglia, who is also a former head coach at Coastal Carolina University.
And what you're seeing now is a direct result of the NCAA not being involved in the final decision-making process with regard to NIL. So with the biggest decision, frankly, and the biggest event that's happened in the history of college sports, the NCAA wasn't around. So you have the wild, wild west, and you're going to have plenty of issues that are associated with that.
Straight ahead on the Bloomberg Business of Sports show. But first, let's look at some of the top stories of the week, and let's start with A-Rod. Yes, we know him as A-Rod. Alex Rodriguez, investing in Fight Promoter Professional Fighters League, which goes to show you that when you have enough money, Damian, you can invest in anything.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, look, you know about A-Rod's SPAC. You know, he's had some kind of some stumbles in terms of finding some investments for the SPAC, but it looks like he found something here in Fight Promoter PFL. It looks like he is, I think the initial round that he's now in values the company at something on the order of $500 million, right? And he joins others like Edgar Bronfman, Ares Capital, I believe even Wiz Khalifa are invested in the organization. And so, look, you know, I mean, Ultimate Fighting, I mean, MMA, that's hot stuff, Michael. You know it.
Yeah, as they used to say, even in The Godfather, there's a lot of money in that fighting. And when you get into A-Rod and the investments, his name alone can draw a lot of investors.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you know, A-Rod is now also, I believe, a controlling shareholder of the Minnesota Timberwolves, I believe. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, he's been making moves. And look, you know, I mean, kudos to him, because I think what it comes down to for A-Rod and what makes it so impressive to me are the partners he chooses. So when he invested in the T-Wolves, I mean, I think Mark Lohr, former exec at Walmart, was kind of his partner in that deal. And look, I mean, just looking at the partners here for PFL, I mean, like I said, Edgar Bronfman and so forth, it looks like, you know, he surrounds himself with some talented investors, and, you know, kudos to him. You know, you really can't shake a stick at it. You know, A-Rod is doing things, and he's moving markets. A-Rod
is going to join the board of directors in this latest deal, and I'm sure that he's going to knock a home run. Oh, there's a pun. There we are. He'll be fine with this. Next topic to talk about, and this is something we might want to bring up with our guest later on, too. Nick Saban. He is calling out Texas A&M for using NIL deals to buy players. The Alabama coach who was talking about NIL deals and all the money that you can make, he's not happy with Texas A&M right now.
Well, I mean, he's not just calling out A&M. He's calling out his former assistant, Jimbo Fisher, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be clear. And look, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are a lot of things that are wrong with NIL. And the fact is, you know, if you look at like Jackson State, for example, I think they paid a Division I player to enroll. They paid him nearly $1 million. And it's these collectives, right? These third-party marketing kind of agencies that are backed by boosters for a specific university that are basically paying these athletes to join the university. I mean, if you look at University of Miami, I think they're paying athletes $400,000 each to be a member of that team. I mean, this is it. Look, it's pay for play now. It's no longer about you know, athletes basically earning their keep. They're earning before they get there.
Do you think that this is something, as we go along, the Supreme Court will step in one day and say, hey, whoa, wait a minute, we've seen enough?
I do. I mean, look, I think the reality is the NCAA can't enforce anything because none of this stuff is illegal any longer, right? So despite, you know, it being bad for the sport, good for the sport, whatever the case may be, the fact that the NCAA is operating with its hands cuffed behind its back, tells me everything I need to know. And look, if you look at NCAA Pres Mark Emmert, I mean, he stepped down, I think, in large part due to all the issues they're having with NIL, Michael.
Now, I'm not going to bring up that the Aggies did beat Alabama last season. But, hey, listen, Nick Saban, he is, when it comes to football coaches, especially in today's world, he is the football god of coaches right now. So, yes, when he says something, I'm going to listen to it. Whether I agree or disagree, I don't know. Because I guess, Damian, my view has always been, if you are an athlete, whether you're in college or whether you are pro, get what you can while you can. Yeah. Do it legally, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think they have. I mean, look, the athletes are doing what they have to do, I mean, they're basically looking to get paid now. I just think it's going to be interesting to hear Joe Moglia's thoughts on this, because for me, is that part of the recruiting process now? How much are they going to pay you on the way in? How much are you going to get paid over the tenure of your time there? And look, I mean, these transfer rights and all this stuff that goes on. I mean, the fact that an athlete can basically commit to a university and then leave without any penalty, they don't lose a year of eligibility or anything. I mean, it's just becoming like free agency, right? I mean, at the college level. It's unbelievable.
Next topic. If you're worried about the NBA playoffs ratings, don't worry about it. According to Sportico, thanks to the Warriors and Celtics, we've got some good games and a lot of eyeballs on the TV watching them.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think, the Golden State Dallas series, hopefully it's not such a one-sided affair as we're kind of getting the sense it might very well be. I mean, Golden State looks like they showed up again in the third quarter. If this is the old Golden State team that does that and starts blowing teams out like that, good luck. But a Warriors-Celtics matchup is just going to be a huge win for the NBA.
It means a lot also for the Boston area, because the Celtics, obviously, huge for Boston, but those restaurants around there by the Garden, oh my goodness, they are loving every minute of it, David.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, look, let's be clear, though. The Celtics still got to get through the Heat and Jimmy Butler, right? I mean, Jimmy he's lights out. But look, Jason Tatum, what a great run the Celtics are making here. And I mean, Tatum is really rising to the occasion. He just looks awesome.
Well, there was some problems with Al Horford from the fact that he's got a clear protocol and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But and I think the games where he wasn't there, it caused a problem, and they were shorthanded. But hey, as we progress through the weekend and as we continue on, I am smelling NBA playoffs, which is why the ratings are looking very good.
That's right. First two rounds, of the NBA playoffs, we have now seen 4.1 million viewers. That's the highest since 2018. I think in last year, by comparison, it was only 3.6 million at this time. So go shows, maybe coming out of the lockdown, people are paying a little bit more attention here.
Looks like the Splash Brothers are coming through. Joining us now, the former chairman of the board and CEO of TD Ameritrade, Joe Moglia, who is also a former head football coach at Coastal Carolina University. Joe, thank you so much for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on, Michael.
Damian, I was thinking of the questions that that pops in my head, and I know you were thinking about it. The first thing, you're connected with TD Ameritrade, and you also have the experience of being a head football coach. How did those two paths cross?
I began my career as a football coach, and I did that for 16 years. And my goal was to be the head coach at a major school, and I was defensive coordinator at Dartmouth at the time. And in January '84, if you recall, Miami upset Nebraska for the national championship, and they offered me a job. And they were the team of the '80s, and every one of those guys had terrific jobs, and that could not have been a better opportunity for me. But I had also gone through a divorce. We had 4 kids. I'd be living in Coral Gables. My family would be living in New Hampshire. And back then, we didn't make much money. And the life of a football coach is 7 days a week during the season, 80 hours a week. There's no days off for 5 months. And toughest career decision I've ever made was turning down that job. But I didn't think I could do my job as a coach if I couldn't live up to my responsibility as a father. Okay, so what else then? I majored in economics in School of Fordham, and I always had an interest in Wall Street. So I wound up hustling, and Merrill Lynch gave me an opportunity in their institutional MBA training program. There were 26 of us, 25 MBAs and 1 football coach, everybody said this football guy's not going to make it here. But I'm very, very proud of my career at Merrill Lynch. I was there 17 years. And then 2001, Ameritrade was in real trouble. Frankly, they were going out of business. And they offered me the job, and I took it. So I moved from New York City to Omaha, Nebraska, where we're headquartered. And again, I couldn't be prouder of the job we did there. So at beginning of 2009, I stepped down and became chairman, which I was proud of. And at the time, we had delivered 500% return in the previous 6 years for our shareholders. And this included the financial crisis. We were by far the number one performer in terms of any financial publicly traded company in the world. So if we had won 2 or 3 national championships in a row and we were at Vanderbilt, the coach of Vanderbilt probably get any job he wanted. That's where I was at the time. And I wound up then getting a call, which I never anticipated, from a group of alumni at Yale telling me that the job may be open and would I be interested. I reminded them I had not coached for 24 years. And they said, yeah, but we looked at the skill sets that head coach is supposed to have. We think you not only have those skill sets, but we think you really have competitive advantages other people don't have. What's that? Well, this has never been done before. So in 140 years of college football, it's never happened. It's going to take a unique president that can assess risk-reward decisions, et cetera. And you don't have a lot. You got a lot of very intelligent presidents in academia, but not that type of president. But think about it. I did. I ultimately decided at a time when I could do pretty much anything I wanted to. I thought I wanted to go back. I decided to go back to football. So I spent 2 years in Nebraska, then 1 year in the UFL, and then the president at the president at Coastal gave me the opportunity to come down and try to turn around their program, which we did.
Well, Joe, I'm wondering, look, clearly, some of the headlines that are grabbing everyone's attention today, Nick Saban going after Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M with regard to what's wrong with NIL. My question for you is, do you see any changes in how student athletes are approaching the recruitment process due to NIL? I mean, are they more concerned with getting paid today than they are with getting a sound education or just, improving as an athlete?
Well, I think Damian, you were talking about a lot of money. Like, I don't know exactly what the number is, but I'm probably pretty close. Right now, there are probably at least 35 players that are getting $1 million a year or more. And I think in 3 years, we'll have well over 100 players getting $1 million a year, and probably 5 to 10 making around the $5 million number. Now, think about that. These are 20-year-old kids. So when you ask them, what's more important to them, the money or their education, I think they probably lean toward the money. I think most of them would say the money. And I think the really smart ones would say, well, both are important to me. There's no reason why I can't do both. And that would be something that I would certainly advocate. There's no reason why you can't get a good education and wind up making a lot of money besides that. But, the bickering going on now between Saban and between Jumbo, this is just going to go. This is not going to stop. It's not going to stop. And, there are no rules here. There are no real guidelines. And you've got bylaws in the NCAA that, frankly, contradict some of the rules that laws that have been passed that's allowing this to happen. And what you're seeing now is a direct result of the NCAA not being involved in the final decision-making process with regard to NIL. So when the biggest decision, frankly, and the biggest event that's happened in the history of college sports, the NCAA wasn't around. So you have the wild, wild west, and you're going to have plenty of issues that are associated with that. There are things that are legal to do today that the NCAA 40 years ago would have given you the death penalty for. So you're going to have some issues with regards to college sports going forward.
Well, which brings us to the next question: where do you see the future of college sports going? Because some people love the NIL, and other people are highly critical of it. Will we see one day when the courts come in and rule, hey, wait a minute, let's settle down here for a minute?
Well, a couple things, Mike. I think, first of all, I am a business guy, so I do understand how the money works. And the amount of money that Power 5 schools gets is incredible. For example, I bet you, I don't know the exact number, but I'm pretty close, that last year, each school in the Big Ten received a check for $70 million just for football. And all the Power 5 schools are getting those types of numbers. Just for football, one check. But it's Power 5. Now, if you look at us in your group of 5, Coastal Carolina, our entire athletic budget for 17 sports is $31 million. Right? So you got the Power 5. Then when it comes to money, there is a humongous gap. You got the G5, and then there's a gap from there, and you got the FCS. So in terms of Division One, the only league that anybody cares about is going to be the Power Five, but they get an incredible amount of money. Understanding that, I can appreciate why all along players, agents, lawyers, etc., are raising their hand and say we should get a piece of that. So that's what's happened. My issue is not the NIL. My issue is that it happened with no structure, no guidelines, no rules. The NCAA was nowhere to be found, and this was 15 months ago. All right, so now the college leadership, university leadership in athletics, who I know a lot of those people. They're smart, they're sharp, they're on the toes, they care about the schools, they care about the leagues, but they're not business people. And by now, after 15 months, something should have come up here in terms of some sort of structure, some sort of guidelines, something. Now, you're not going to get the genie back in the bottle. You can't do that. That's not going to happen. That's impossible. Not going to happen. But there's got to be a better way to be able to have structure around and underneath what's going on now with regards to NIL as far as colleges go.
Joe, look, sports and football in particular, it's all about commitment. I'm sure you'd agree. I mean, my question for you is, can you let me know your thoughts on the NCAA's decision to abandon the transfer rule? I mean, what is the impact of allowing student athletes to transfer schools without losing a year of eligibility? And to that end, coaches as well. I mean, it just seems like everyone's a free agent out there.
I mean, we're on the same side on this one. I think it was, to me, as a leader, I consider it disgraceful that the NCAA was not intimately involved with everything that was going on here with regard to the NIL. So to me, that they very, very much shirked their duties. And again, if they were run by a business, everybody there would be fired. Then a couple of months later, they get rid of the transfer rule. Now, by getting rid of the transfer rule, in effect, every player is a free agent every day. And they can do what they want. They can put themselves on the portal and, in effect, be recruited, even though technically they're not allowed to. See, they use different terminology. They can do certain things. But even though technically they're not allowed, this is absolutely going to happen, where somebody's recruiting a kid that they really want, and the Power 5 school said, I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to get you an NIL deal for $500,000. And then the next school says, he says, well, Ohio State just kind of told him I got $500,000, and UCL is going to give me $800,000. Then I'm making it up now. Kentucky's going to give me $1 million too. That can happen every day. So when you look at same thing with the coaches, so to reinforce the point that you're making, Damian, a coach, let's say, that has a 5-year contract and has a really good first year, he can be poached away by a larger school for much more money because the G5 doesn't have that money. FCS doesn't have that money. So and all they have to do is wind up paying them a buyout. The buyout relative to what's going on is minuscule. So if the school loses their coach after 1 year and they get a buyout for that buyout is nothing. That coach can leave. He's making more money. He's going to be able to hire any assistants he wants for more money. And all those players that he wants can put themselves on the portal and he can bring them with them. All right. So what you've just done is you've devastated the school that you've left. You just devastated that school. And so therefore, when you look at the pros or you look at the business world, a player that signs a 5-year contract, it's a 5-year contract. Now, you can cut him, but you still got to pay him. You can extend it if you want to. That's okay. Or you can let it lapse, and then he becomes a free agent. Same thing with a coach. Or same thing with an executive in the business world. You got a 5-year deal. You got a 5-year deal. That's it. You can't just pick up and go someplace else. Nobody else is even allowed to poach you. Now, you can become a free agent after the deal, but that's it. Okay, so in college sports, an individual player has no responsibility along those lines and can leave any time he wants to because there's no transfer rule, number one. Number two, with regard to the coaches, I think it's a disgrace. You've got to have a contract that just like any place else in the world, you have to live up to the terms of that particular contract. Now, if the NFL were run the way colleges run right now with regard to the contracts and the buyouts as far as the coaches goes, and with the free agency that exists with the players, they wouldn't be allowed to exist. I mean, they'd exist, but they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. They don't do it that way now. They wouldn't let themselves do it that way. A business would never be run that way. So this to me is it's a mess.
I think you have foreshadowed this next question. I'm going to ask you about NCAA President Mark Emmert's planned departure by the end of June of 2023. What kind of legacy do you think he has left for the NCAA?
I'm sure Mark has done a lot of good things over the span of his tenure. But again, the most critical thing that's happened in history, college sports, period, is NIL, and he was nowhere to be found. I can't imagine a business or a function or something in the NFL where that would have been allowed by somebody in charge, period. So instead, a year ago, when NIL happened, a year ago, he got a contract extension when all this was happening. And then this year, they decide jointly that it's time for him to step down. But he doesn't. But Scott said, but he's going to continue to be. I'm sure he'll be a lame duck for the next few months. And then he gets paid for 2023. So he's being rewarded. That's like $4 million a year, whatever he's making. So he's being significantly rewarded for having not done his job. I have an issue with that. I have an issue with that from a business perspective.
So, Joe, what can the NCAA do to make things better? How can they rectify the situation at this point?
I think the NCAA have had their time. I think they've had their chance, and they blew it. So I don't know why the leadership within college sports wants to be able to just keep letting them run things. You talk about antitrust a lot, and the reality is that, competition in capitalism is very, very much appreciated. I think that the leadership, begin with the Power Five, the leadership in college sports today should create their own organization. You can name it. You got the Confederation of college sports, college athletes, college athletics, the FCA. You put together your own governing body, and you hire independent people that do not have an affiliation with an individual team or league. They have the skill sets required to be able to make real decisions, and more than anything, the guts to do what they believe is the right thing for college sports. Right now, you hire them, but they're independent and they have real autonomy. So when they make a decision, everybody in college sports abides by that. If everybody's abiding by what this executive committee decides, everything will start to work. Everything will literally start to work. Now, I'm not suggesting to get rid of the NIL because that's not going to happen. But again, you can provide structure around that, and I think you'd be far better served because of that. If you're going to run the place like a business, then should the Power Five even stay the Power Five? You have, if they're making X amount of dollars now, right now the Big Ten is renegotiating their contract for television. That's going to be a huge number. But if you took the Power Five and you divide them into two groups, let's say one is the more, for our purposes, you would have named it this, but the more elite programs in history. And, the other group, well, I bet you, I said a little while ago, each team in the Big Ten probably makes $70 million. I think 3 years from now, if you did something like this, I think each of the schools in that elite group within the Power Five probably make $140 million. So, and then they can decide how they want to transfer some of the money down to G5 if they want to, or FCS if they want to, or even to other sports if they want to. They can make all those decisions, but it's not working the way it's working.
Which brings me to a story I must ask about involving my man Damian Sassower, former Detroit Lions player. I love that guy. And this was at the time you were advising about Ben, the number one overall pick at the time when he was, on creating a budget for his rookie contract. This was way back in 2010. Please lay some knowledge on us. What happened?
Well, I spent 2 years at Nebraska when I decided I wanted to go back to football, and Tom Osborne was good enough to have me spend some time with Bo Pelini, and Bo and I hit it off, and he offered me that opportunity to be with him. So for 2 years, my title was executive advisor to the head football coach, but I was there full-time with the staff. And the guys all knew. I mean, the players all knew what my role had. I remember I had just stepped down as CEO, and I was currently chairman. And they don't get too much of that, in the football locker room or on campus. And they were aware of that. And Damian, of course, was having an incredible year, and he knew he was going to be a top pick, and he knew that the money was going to be significant. And he had spent some time talking to me about everybody wants a piece of him, but there's going to be time when, he really might need a little guidance, and could he count on me for that? And then secondly, and here's where I thought he was very, very thoughtful and insightful, he said, there were too many players in the NFL or NBA, for that matter, that, after they've left the league, they don't have any of the money left. And I really want to make sure I'm doing a good job of saving and investing my money. So whenever I step down, whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, whenever it is, whenever I step down, I've really done a good job of investing my money so I have enough to live on, so I don't have to worry about it in the lifestyle that I wanted for me and my family, et cetera. So I said I'd be glad to help with that. And we talked about how taxes affect things, and we talked about different things and different things you need to think about. But then I also talked about how critical it is. People really, most times, don't really know what they're doing with their money. And I don't care if you have a lot of money or I don't care if you have a little bit of money. I think a budget is a very, very wise thing to have. At the very, very least, you recognize where you're spending your money. In certain cases, you may need it to limit yourself to spending in certain areas. In other areas, you're not necessarily limiting yourself, but you at least know where the money is being spent. I told Damian I wanted him to put together a budget, but he had to come down to my office, which is in Omaha. So he traveled the hour. He shows up at the office, he's wearing a suit. And, I was pleased with that. And he showed me his budget, and his budget was like $60,000. And I thought that was pretty good. I said, but with the money you're going to be making, you're going to be making astronomical amounts of money. Remember, that's half of it after taxes, what you're going to have. But with the people that you're going to be involved with, and the people you're going to be traveling with, and your buddies and your peers within the league, the lifestyle is going to be very, very different from that. So you really need to think more thoughtfully about how you really would live 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and you might want to redo the budget. So he did. He came back, it was about a month later, again in a suit, with a budget. I think it was around $220,000. I don't remember exactly what it was. But he and I have stayed friends, and we have, we have done a lot of things together. And some of the businesses that I'm involved with, I have introduced him to all those guys. And he's just a very, very thoughtful guy. And he's a smart guy. He's an engineer by trade. He's in the real estate business in terms of construction, but with regard to his family. And so we have been in regular contact over the years.
And Joe, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the trend in sports gambling. Excuse me, $87 billion in legalized sports gambling expected in the year 2022 here in the United States. That is a big number. That is a number that is larger than the Sultanate of Oman. So for me, my question to you is, what's your thoughts on it? How do you think that's impacting college sports? How do you think that's impacting all that we've been talking about with NIL and player rights and what have you? I mean, do you think it's a good thing, or do you think this is a real risk going forward?
All right, so I think, again, I remember when we talked about the NIL initially, I said as a business guy, I can see the money, and I can see why that money needs to be better distributed. Okay, so with regards to gambling, the common sense part of me says people are going to gamble whether it's legal or not. They're going to gamble. So if I'm running a state, I would rather get my taxes. I can significantly help increase my own balance sheet and my budget by having all that taxed. So I think it's wiser to have all that legalized than not, period. Because it's going to happen anyway. So you may as well legalize it. And then you can have some structure around it. Number one. Number two, then you talk about with regard to the NIL or the impact it can have on players. So people are betting on games now. So if somebody wants to buy a player to cheat, buy a player to not give it his very, very best in a game, or he doesn't intercept the pass he's supposed to, he throws the ball, he's not quite on target that particular day, whatever it might, he fumbles as a running, whatever it might be. Well, that's out and out cheating. And but you can't legislate that. In other words, we know it's wrong. And I think, a real man, a real leader, a real woman, that you need to have the guts to do what you believe is the right thing, and you can't legislate ethics. So if people are going to cheat, then people are going to cheat, and there is a tremendous amount of money involved. But you know what? There was already a tremendous amount of money involved. And remember, we're talking about the gamblers now. That's what you're talking about. So if I'm a gambler and I want to bet $100, okay, that's one thing. If I want to bet $500,000, if I want to bet $1 million, and I'm willing to make an investment to NIL in a particular player for him to do what I need him to do at certain games, well, what I'm doing is unethical, it's illegal, it's wrong. And it's unethical, it's illegal, it's wrong for that individual player. But those things can exist right now. Right now, those are wrong things. But legalizing gambling, I don't think encourages that any more than what might be the case today. And I hope whatever takes place today, I really truly hope it's minimal, and I believe it is. But to think there's none of that going on, I think that's probably naive.
I'm going to spill the beans a little bit. You are currently writing a book right now on leadership. How is that going? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's going well. I think there's so many other things kind of going on that that we've kind of held off on it a little bit. Our agent's working now to talking to different people to see who'd really want to buy it and do it, and we're probably about 40% through the book. And as soon as we get to go ahead, I think we'll probably be able to get our part finished about 3 months, and hopefully it gets published next year.
Hey, Joe, last question from me. Who's going to win the Super Bowl this year? Who do you like?
I think if Brady comes back, Tampa Bay's going to win it. And if he doesn't come back, I think Green Bay's going to win it. But the reality is I really don't know who's going to win it.
He's selling the Bills. You heard it first.
And this question involves a lot about you as a person and your thoughts during your lifetime. It kind of goes back full circle to the first question that was asked to you. If there's anything that you would want to do over again, what would you do in your professional life?
I think Coach has to make some very critical calls during a game. And hopefully the coach has done a good job, like that sprint, assessing the risk-reward of when you're supposed to go for two. And I don't mean by some chart. When are you really supposed to do that? When are you supposed to go for a fourth down, et cetera, et cetera. And a real critical decision, when are you going to fake? What real critical decision you're going to make during the course of a game that if you fail, potentially could have a negative impact in terms of the outcome of the game. And you're going to have everybody complaining to you on Monday morning. Well, that's after the fact. And I think one of the things that my leadership philosophy is, by the way, when I was coaching at Coastal, we were the only team in the country that didn't have any rules. Literally, we had no rules. We had a standard. Stand on your own 2 feet, take responsibility for yourself, treat others with dignity and respect, and live with the consequences of your actions. Now, that held up for me the first time around as a coach. Held up for me is the standard that I used the entire time I was on Wall Street, and is the base upon which Coach Carolina football has been built. Now, because I had 140 guys, we call that BAM, be a man. But it's not sexist at all. My daughters were raised on that, and that's the same standard female executives were held to with me in the business world. But the guys, BAM worked. And so when you think about that, one of the things that is critical, I think, ultimately we want to be happy, we want to feel good about who we are, which means we've got to make good decisions under pressure. And to be able to do that, you really have to understand who you are. Most people really don't. We tend to be a composite of all the people around us. So I call this spiritual soundness. It doesn't have to be religious, but it can be. But it's really understanding exactly who you are, so when it's time to be able to make tough decisions, you increase the probability you're going to be able to do that. I have approached my life like that for the last 5 decades. From the time I was 21, I started to think this way, and it's very, very much part of me today. And it's something that I teach and share these concepts with people around me. I've been doing that for a while. So the decisions I have made in the past. I became a teenage father, and I didn't make that decision consciously. But the decisions I've made in the past were decisions at that moment in time I really assessed, I really thought about, I really believed was the right thing to do. And in hindsight, would I have changed it? Well, but I say that today with a benefit of X amount of years experience after that. That wasn't the situation I was in at that moment of time. So when I look back on my life, and I consider that I'm proud of who I am from a personal perspective. I'm really proud and love. I feel great about my family. I feel great about my loved ones and friends around me. I've had 2 careers that I've really been pretty good at. Most people don't have one. And they were 2 careers that I was really intensely passionate about. Well, how many people be able to have something like that? How many people have done what I've just said?
Joe Moglia, former chairman of the board and CEO of TD Ameritrade, also a former head football coach at Coastal Carolina University. You laid some knowledge on us, man. Thank you so much, Joe. We really do appreciate it.
Mike, I appreciate you having me. Damian, I appreciate you being on with me.
Take care now. Joe Moglia, he has a knowledge full of pretty much everything. I could bet you we could sit down for a good 3 hours and just talk about life in general, Damian.
He spent a lot of time, obviously, in New England, hence the reason he's a Tom Brady fan, I guess. But no, I mean, look, for me, he's unbelievable. I mean, truthfully, some of his experiences, certainly working with guys like Tom Osborne in Nebraska, and then obviously, his time at TD Ameritrade and Merrill Lynch. 20 years in the business. It's a rarity. rarity to find somebody like that.
Yeah, and his story about Ndamukong Suh,
Yes.
which I'm a big fan as a Detroit Lions fan. And when I'm not yelling at the TV set, no, Ndamukong, don't stomp on his head. He is a great football player. And you see that from his investments that he has made later on in life. Just a brilliant man, and I salute him.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And he's doing it for the students. He's doing it for the kids. I mean, his wealth advisor, that's what they focus on, preparing student athletes for the real world. And so, kudos to him for, giving back at this time in his career.
Hey, you haven't been introduced to this part of the show.
My goal is to be the number one pick. That's something I've been dreaming of since a kid.
It feels better to be number one than number 5.
I wear the number because of Mike.
We have a chance to go for 3 in a row.
Good numbers at a good time. When I first started wearing that number, I was just happy and proud.
Bloomberg Business of Sports, the number of the week.
Guess what time it is? It's time for the number of the week. And let's put it this way. We like to do it in the Price is Right style. So let's pretend you're on the stage right now.
Right.
Okay? You're on the stage, and we're playing the quick range game. Okay? And here's my question. In the XFL, currently, right now, what is the average pay of the regular XFL player annually?
Oh, I would say $750,000. It's just a guess.
$750,000
per year.
Per year for the
on
XFL.
Average.
XFL.
On average. Why? It's got to be more. You're looking at me like
XFL.
I have 3 heads. Yeah. Not even close. 2.5.
The average salary, according to different sites, roughly $55,000.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. These guys are out there killing themselves.
Yeah, man. And your range, man, it just flew off the daggone board.
I would have thought
man.
I was undercutting that. And I thought it was Price is Right. You can't go over. But
well, you hit Drew Carey with the whole set, man. The range game is like, they're carting you off, man.
Well, I'm glad I'm not in the XFL then.
Man, we had a lot of fun with you, Damian. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So glad you could come on here. This is the Bloomberg Business and Sports Show. We're here each and every week at the same time, plus online, wherever you get your podcasts. You can catch those Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Along with Damian Sassower, I'm Michael Barr. You can follow me on Twitter at Big Bar Sports. Damian, can you give us your handles?
Sure, it's Damian Sassower at D Sassower on Twitter.
Thanks for joining us. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big money in the world of sports. You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports, Bloomberg Radio, around the world.